Mr. Pretorious, good evening, sir.
Hi, Jack. Are you good?
I'm very good. How's that signal? Is the sound and everything like that coming through?
It sounds fine. Yeah, it sounds fine.
Okay, I think it's very apt that you've got that UFUDU trophy there in the background, which I'd really like to touch on.
Well, I thought that was pretty good. Your name's on the back there somewhere. Yeah, well done. Congratulations. Really good fish.
Thanks very much for that. I think it was a lot more asked in class, but no, I'm going to start off with a little bit of horn blowing. You were pivotal in the inception of my own fly fishing journey and chasing these elusive, almost mythical creatures on our coastline that a handful of anglers have actually managed to tame on the long rod. And you've been doing it successfully for quite some time, not only in your own personal capacity, but you've guided and hosted many people that have caught fish, if not over 100 centimeters, very damn well close to that mark, sort of at the 85, 90 and up. Been reading articles of yours for some time. And, you know, I don't want this to be a rehearsed interview. I want us to be quite organic and for us to shoot from the hip. But most importantly, I'd like to ask you to give me a sort of, or give us rather, an elevator pitch as to how the hell did you wake up one day and have that desire to do the impossible? How did it start?
Well, when I first started fly fishing, I mean, I started in the salt, and the closest place where one was likely to get these kingies was up at Cozy Bay.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I mean, any fish over 60 centimeters was regarded as quite a big fish. Are you talking about 19? What would that be? 94, round about there, 94, 95. And so we would go up. I would go up with a bunch of mates quite regularly, and we would obviously try and find the best tides, fish the lakes, and we started catching some really nice fish up to 70 centimeters, then 80 centimeters, and that was regarded as like really big. And I remember on one occasion, a friend of mine, Guy Ronaldson, and I caught one of 80 centimeters in the lakes, and I said to him, well, why don't we try going to Bunganek and see if we can do this? So we worked out a really good tide. We went there, and it was particularly rough on that day, and he caught an 80 centimeter fish. So that's about 10 kgs. And it gave him a really, really good pull. And I just said to him, well, why don't we just at some point in time see if we can catch this 100 centimeter jig, you know, because nobody had ever done this.
Sure.
And it was on that basis that the ambition really sort of started. And we would then go to the mouth, fish that mouth area quite a bit. But then at that stage, still with 9 weights, I hadn't even considered this 12 weight option yet. And in fact, it was like a really foreign thing. Hardly anybody ever used a 12 weight, you know, unless you were fishing off ski boats and the like. Sure. But and then in 94, I went off, Pam and I went off for a year, and I'd bought a 12 weight then, and I was still a relative novice, I suppose, in the fly fishing thing. And I always sort of think back now, if only I knew now what I know then, or what I knew then, it would have been fantastic, because we spent a year just traveling all over the place, fishing from top of Mozambique down to the bottom. We fished for tigers, for everything, you know. Sure. But this GT thing was something that I was particularly concerned about, and then it was when we'd started UFUDU fly fishing per se, which was in '99. I remember going down. It was just before our first guest arrived at the beginning of that particular season, and I'd gone down to the mouth area with Pam, and we, you know, finished setting the camp up and what have you. And it was a 3-month camp. So sitting at the mouth, and the next thing I just saw these, and it was amazing. I've never seen it since, but in the mouth itself, there was just this whole shoal of grunter, and, you know, spotted grunter. And it was absolutely incredible. And the next thing, you just saw these 10 shapes coming in, massive jeets coming in, and chasing these grunter. Now, a grunter can't jump, but it looked like a washing machine, these things sort of trying to get out the way. And it would have been about 10, 15 seconds of this mayhem, and these fish would turn around and go out to sea again. My first impression was, well, in fact, the reason I got to the grunter was, on the first place, was I thought, well, here's a great opportunity to catch one on fly. So as I got there, these jeets came in and chased the thing, and I just said, no, forget about the grunter, see if you can catch one of these jeets. And at that stage, the local youngsters were throwing njungus, which is like a traditional spear, at these grunter. And they were about 1.5 kilograms, 2 kilogram grunter. And then the Parks Board came in and just said the guys aren't allowed to fish there or do anything. So I then went and got my 12 weight and then stood at the mouth area. And as these jeets came in again, before they got into the mouth, I threw a popper at these things. And I mean, this thing ate this popper like you can't believe.
Yeah.
But that stage, I mean, I think I was fishing like 20 kilogram a leader sort of thing. And it popped me in no time.
Sure.
And I went back with my sort of tail between my legs back to the camp, and back there the next day again. Same thing happened, and these jeets came in again, and I just got cleaned up again. And I just said, well, we've got to really rethink this thing. And that's where the whole thing sort of started.
This was 1999.
This was 1999, yeah. You know, like
so that was
really
your
targeting
first
the big
crack at these elusive specimens.
That was the first, yeah. And then it was again on one of those occasions. It was a year later or 2 years later. I think it was in 2001 when I was now at the mouth area again, and again it was at the beginning of one of our seasonal camps, and I was standing at the mouth, and the next thing I saw these jeets come in, and there was a guy standing there with me, just a local chap. Well, it wasn't a local guy, but he was from Johannesburg, wanting to set up a camp in Cozy Bay. And he said to me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm waiting for these GTs, because I could see them coming in and out of the mouth. And he said, you think you can catch that with that little rod of yours? So I said, well, I'm going to have a good try at it. And the next thing I just said to him, excuse me, because I saw these jeets coming in, did a backhand cast because of the wind. And this thing ate this fly probably 2 rod lengths away from us, and this guy nearly dropped his beer that he was drinking at the time. Yeah. And he actually tagged that fish, and that was the first one that was ever landed. That was the one of 104 centimeters. And I remember having released this fish, phoning Guy Ronaldson, the same guy who caught that 80 centimeter fish a few years ago, and he was working at King's Sports at the time. King's, I think it's King's Sports. And I said to him, Guy, I've just landed a 104 centimeter fish. And he said, that's unbelievable. And I said, how long did it take you to land it? And I said, it was probably about 20 minutes. And the next thing, the guys were phoning me back from, that the word obviously got around, and they said, well, that fish is sick. You can never land fish like that on a fly rod in 20 minutes. And that's where this whole thing started, and started looking at the whole idea of, what backing we use, what leaders we use, rods, and then it became a real obsession. Yeah. So that was the first one that as I say, that really, really intrigued me, that you can land these fish. And South African surf zone is particularly difficult because, as everybody knows, I mean, these jeets, the first thing they do is they head for bricks and reef and that, and they clean you up in no time. So it really became an obsession to start targeting these things. And then likewise, I would say to guests, there is this possibility that this can happen. And at that stage, all of our backing was like 30-pound Dacron. And I still remember getting hold of, what's his name? He was with Stealth then.
Gareth Adams.
Before Gareth Adams, what was his name? The old elderly gentleman, hell of a nice guy. The name just slipped me. But and I said to him, "Can we get 50-pound Dacron?" And he said, "Well, let's see." And eventually, I did get. We managed to get a spool of like 3,000 or 2,600 meters of it. And I remember going to one of our promotions we used to do for the fly fishing experience. We would do what we have a hookup, and we would invite a whole lot of guests to different venues, either Johannesburg, Cape Town, or Durban. And we would have everybody come in. We would do a bit of a talk, etc. And I was speaking about this 50-pound Dacron, and the guy said, "Well, Pretorious, you're now fishing with rope." I mean, and if you think about what the guys are fishing with now, it's unbelievable. And then it was this whole thing of trying to work out how to put as much pressure as you could on these jeets without breaking, you know, like without losing fly lines,
Sure.
etc. And it became really, really important that if you did break up, you broke up front, you know, preferably at the fly itself, so that there was, you know, very little damage to the fish and subsequent sort of, yeah, just stress levels. But that was really how the whole thing started. You know, it was from, you know, going from the lakes and, you know, catching 80 centimeter fish, which was at that stage the biggest that had ever been caught on fly, to the surf zone where we caught an 80 centimeter, 80 centimeter fish. And then from there on, we went on to the meter fish, and and subsequently, obviously, broken up a hell of a lot. And each time, obviously, you think you learn a lot, but you never do. You're always learning in this game.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ben. I think the inroads that you made with the tackle and resources that you had available back then are absolutely incredible. I mean, a lot of the stuff, you know, the stuff that we use today, and a lot of my my fellow accompanying anglers that join me in this lunatic of a pursuit that we do, we still use this. We're still reading a lot of those articles that you wrote back then for FOSAF in terms of tides and weathers and barometric systems and things like that. And yeah, it's interesting how one almost has to sort of reverse engineer the process. I mean, before you can hook this fish, you need to sort of think about what's going to happen when you hook it, and you need that, and then as such, your search for stronger backing. I also know that you developed your own fly line, the Wet Cell Scientific Anglers UFUDU fly line. How many fish? Well, I mean, you were obviously hooking a lot of fish and losing a lot of fish at this particular stage before you thought, damn it, we'll do our own line. How did that come about, and how did the development of that come about?
Well, the Sci Angler had a Wet Cell 3 line, you know, because we just found that. So this is when the late Paul Weingartz and I actually taught Paul to cast right in the beginning, because he came to me and he just said, well, he's bought this, I think it was a loop rod or whatever it was. And we spent a lot of time teaching him to cast, and then we started fishing together a lot. And then once I got him sort of hooking, you know, catching his first jeets, that was up at M10 a few years later. He and I fished a lot together, looking for these jeets, specifically for these jeets. Yeah. And we would fish at night. We would fish, God knows, any time of the day, day or night, to try and catch these things. And I found that the best line that we could find at the time was this Wet Cell 3. So in other words, it sank at about 5.5 inches per second, but it was a freshwater line. And we subsequently found out that the breaking strain was probably only about 8 kilograms, 10 kilograms, whatever it is. But it was also a short line. It was 90 foot long. And we had a reasonable amount of success with this line, but until we started popping these lines. And then they also discontinued like the 12s, 13s, etc., and only went down to like a 10 weight line. I then wrote to Sci Anglers, and I sent them a whole lot of photographs of the fish that we had caught with these lines, and said to these guys, chaps, we're in trouble here, because we've used this line, specifically the sink rate that works particularly well. We want a longer line, we want a stronger line, and these are the sort of features that we want, or the characteristics that we want in the fly line. And we asked them if they could send us or make one specifically for us with the UFUDU brand on it, etc. And they said no problem, provided that we order a minimum quantity. They sent us a trial line, but you know, the first demo back, and we said there's 1 or 2 modifications to it. And then when they sent us the fine line, we said this is fine, and then we ordered the batch, which we still got, and I've ordered a re-batch of these things time and time again, because it's now a 110-foot line, and it's got quite a low profile, because it enables you to cast well in wind. In other words, it cuts through the wind really well. Sure. And it casts particularly well as well. And as I say, it sinks at about 5.5 inches per second, which enables you to throw these things into sort of rocky areas, especially where there are big rips happening, swing flies into the area where you want to retrieve from without hooking up on the bottom, and then making a retrieve. And so far, I mean, we've had great success with them. They've been absolutely brilliant, and I still use them to this day, and I think quite a few people still use them. You know, so we've got them in a 10 weight, which we use for the 9 weights or 10 weights, and then in the 10 weight for the 10 weight rods. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've probably bought about 10 of those lines from you in the last.
Yeah, you did. You bought quite a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, as you know, the treacherous coastline that we have, a lot of times we're having to break off on those bricks and things like that. But yeah, it's a great line. It's incredible the developments that you made and with those lines. I still keep 2 or 3 as a backup.
Sure.
I've tended to move to a lot more of the stronger lines and things like that, which I think are giving me a massive advantage over what you guys had back then. But yeah, it was an incredible feat what you did back then. And in terms of, has your tackle, like your rods, your reels, has that, in terms of the brands and things like that you fish, have those changed much over the last couple of years, or are you still pretty much fishing with the bread and butter stuff that you have for the last sort of 10 or 15 years? And if so, why?
Well, I was for many years I fished with Loomis, and it's particularly the cross current. I really enjoyed that, and it was always a good great rod. And then Hardy approached me a few years ago, and they asked me if I would become their brand ambassador, and I said, well, on certain conditions. I said the condition is certainly send me your 9 and your 12 and let me compare them. And so I did that. I had a comparison in terms of just their weight, and their casting ability, obviously, their strength, and every particular aspect that one can think of. And I just found it it's absolutely superb rod. And I've subsequently got into, they now have supplied me with Zephyrus, which is the current sort of the current model. Yes. And I use their reels as well, which is particularly fantastic reels. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe obviously, the reel shootouts has, well, not arguably, the single strongest drag system on the market currently.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing with drags, I mean once you get that first pull and you get the fish running, I palm a lot as well. In fact, I've got photographs on an album where, years ago, it was one night just south of the mouth at Cozy Bay, where this fish just gave me such rev, and I was palming it, and I actually ended up with a blister on the palm of my hand. It subsequently broke me up, but that's the sort of pressure that you've got to be able to put on these fish, and that's when your fly line, your terminal tackle, and your backing, all of that stuff really comes into effect. And where it makes sense that if you are going to break up, you want to break up front, at the knot where you tie the fly on. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So Ben, in terms of monofilament and fluorocarbon, and what sort of breaking strains leaders were you using? I mean, you said you were using 20-kilogram Maxima back then. I'm sure you've obviously improved leaps and bounds since then. What are you throwing at the moment, and why?
I use a polymer because like your straight fluoros, I just don't like the knots that they make. They're very, very, very uncomfortable. But just going back to sort of leaders and things, my general sort of philosophy with everything to do with especially our SERP zone is this: keep it simple, the KISS philosophy, and less is more. So the less knots you tie, the less whatever it is that you have in your connections that you have, the better it is. And just in your general setup, make sure that everything is tied on properly, that you don't have to worry about losing something when the wave smacks you or whatever it is. So just from a clothes point of view and what you're wearing, etc., keep it down to the absolute minimum, and make sure that you've got nothing in front of you other than your stripping basket. Because when you hook up, you want to be able to see the reel. It's absolutely critical that whole area in front of you is clean, so you can see where your feet are. You can see where there's rocks are if you have to move, whatever it is. Because if you start falling around, etc., it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I made that mistake in December. I had a waterproof walkie-talkie on my top, and as that fish ate, it wrapped around there, and I had to jump off the bricks into the outgoing current, to sort of free myself, and nearly found myself being towed out into a rip by a very angry, very enraged GT.
Right.
So, absolutely. Yeah. And you were also responsible for the development of that UFUDU life vest, which is also, it saved my personal ass multiple times on those bricks.
That's fantastic. I mean, that was something that we really battled with in the beginning. I mean, because you're fishing these real dynamic areas, with currents and rips right in front of you, and because that's the only way we can close the gap, as opposed to a guy throwing a plug for 150 meters or whatever it is. We've got to get into those dynamic areas, and and I experimented, well, I thought of a whole lot of different options, having swum quite a few times, and it's very uncomfortable when you get knocked off a rock, especially in low light conditions, into a rip, and you've got a stripping basket, and you're trying to keep everything afloat and yourself, and say your gear and what have you. So I actually thought of, at one stage, like getting these mountaineering cleats that you can sort of tie to yourself and cleat onto a rock behind you, but then you were a little bit limited in terms of how the movement that you have.
Sure.
And then I came across this thing, and it's basically a canoeing vest that I adapted for this thing, and subsequently got them to make them for us. And they've been absolutely essential. In fact, I don't know why conventional people, anybody that fishes in the surf zone, especially guys who fish at night, don't have these things as a matter of course, because number one, it keeps you warm. Number two, it doesn't impede you whatsoever.
Sure.
And you've just got the confidence in which to stand in those areas, getting hit by waves, etc. And if you do fall in, I mean, all you do is flip onto your back and get yourself to safety without panicking. But they're absolutely essential. And I would just say to anybody wanting to fish, especially in our surf zone, and more especially if you're in low light conditions, that's absolutely essential. So when we do have guests, for example, and we're fishing those conditions and those light conditions, I say it's obligatory to wear these things, and if you don't want to wear it, you don't fish. So it's as simple as that, and that's how important I view those that safety equipment. It's really good.
Ben, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember when I made my first purchase, I went fishing with a couple of guys, and they were sort of laughing at me and denigrating me because I look quite odd with this life vest, which is not overly encumbersome by any means, and also has quite some nice storage where you can store the odd fly or the roll of tippet. The last trip that a fellow DarkTide member and myself went on, we actually nearly drowned on the rocks. Luckily, I had a waterproof bag, which was on my back, which acted a little bit like a flotation device. He regrettably didn't. And despite being a South African swimmer and one of the best South African swimmers we've ever had, we both found ourselves in a rip. We had to ditch our tackle. In the blink of an eye, in the sort of twilight hours, the beach was just disappearing before us, and we thought to ourselves, we're either going to drown in this rip, or we're getting bombarded by these waves. We're either going to get turfed onto the bricks, or worst case scenario, we're actually going to be pulled out at night, obviously with Patrick Zambi in full force swimming beneath us, and absolutely no visibility. It was awful. When we actually got to the beach, I broke down in tears when we managed to get back there, because it was a very, very close call, and it was a big eye opener. And something that I just want to reiterate that you said there to a lot of the people that are falling, that are now tuning in. If you do not have a buoyancy device, if not Ben's buoyancy device and his UFUDU life jacket, if you're not fishing out there with a waterproof pack of sorts, you're playing games, you're being extremely foolish. Everyone thinks they're a big strong man until they get turfed on the bricks, and you might even be a worse scenario where you bang your head and you're unconscious, and then it's even worse. I also personally don't go fishing unless I'm with a buddy. I think it's essential, especially given the twilight hours that you fish. I think you'll agree. And we also go with waterproof walkie-talkies, just in the event that we need to communicate with one another and things like that. I think it's very, very important. Ben, have you ever you must have countless stories of fish smoking you and hurting your feelings. Have you had real seas and rods break and things like that? Is any one particular or two particular stories that haunt you to this day that you feel like recanting with our viewers?
Not really. I've never had a rod break. I've never had a reel give any problems. I remember Paul Weingartz once had a what reel did he have? But he hooked a fish sort of at mile 13, which he landed, and in the process of which the foot of the reel came off, and we had to try and juggle the thing to fit it. I can't remember the detail of it, but I know he had a problem with that once. But I personally have never had a problem. I've never had a rod break, etc. And talking about rod breakings or rods break, it's so important to get your angle right, and people tend to sort of lift the rod too high, and the fulcrum is the higher the rod is, the more the fulcrum is in the fish's favor. So you want to get that at about 45, 30 degrees, and at some point in time, that rod just flattens out virtually. You can hold it up, but it flattens out. And when you see that rod flatten out like it, you don't ask the guy, is that a big king? You just know it's a big king.
Of course.
So your rod angle is really important, and then to get the butt of the rod into your chest so that you cantilever it from there, and that's where you put a lot of the pressure. And then coupled with that, obviously you want to palm. You've got your drag set as high as you can put it as whatever you like, and it's still going to run. But palm as well, because that just helps you with the control and stay in touch with the fish. But a fish that I remember, a scenario that I remember, which I think you guys will find quite interesting, was this was now at Cozy Bay, and we were now setting up for a sort of a knee plus one, knee plus two fish south of the mouth. And I say it was neap tides at knee plus one, knee plus two, because we start getting a pushing tide at about 7 o'clock in the evening. And I always said 7:30, 8 o'clock round about there is a really good tide on a pushing tide. So in other words, it's a slow tide that's starting to push. We've worked out during the day when there's good sunlight where you want to fish. You sort of work out where the rips are, where the little channels are, etc. And what I in fact do is I put a stick opposite there, high up on the beach, because I know when you come down at night, it's a completely different thing and a different tide. And you now work out exactly how you have to walk, where you have to, which rock you're going to get onto, and the rock that you're going to get onto, you make sure that you've got plan B as well, so that if a wave hits you, you can step back without falling into a hole or anything like it. Because we do have headlamps, but we never use those things. So the only time you use it is when you're actually when you've got something to untie, or you've got a knot, or you've got a problem, etc. And then you turn your back to the water as well, because you want to be as unobtrusive as possible. So you try and do all of this in the dark, and you make sure that you know where you're going to stand, your fallback position is, etc., etc., etc. And so it was about 5:30, still a little bit of light, and I was anticipating that we would start fishing at about 7 o'clock. So I'm walking south, and I've got 9 weight, and I've got a little popper on this thing, and I'm just throwing. No, in fact, it was a 12 weight. So I've got a little popper on this thing, and I'm just throwing, walking down, messing around really. And as I look down further down to the south, I see this slab and this pectoral fin on this, virtually on the stand. So in other words, there was this, where the surf pushed up, there was like a little lip that was probably about 30 centimeters high. And I see this fish sliding back off this thing back into the water. And then I figured out what it was. So I ran along like this, and I see it's a big jeep. And as I got there, I threw this popper at them, and I could just hear them kicking off. You know, you can hear the like I say, as they kick off in the water. And there must have been 6 or 7 of them. But what this guy was doing was chasing ghost crabs up the beach. And it actually, he's hit everything, the whole side of his body was out of this thing. And trying to get the ghost crabs as they obviously escaped. So I walked back, and I said to the guys, I said, the jeets are around, and I'm going to sit down. And I sat there, I've got an orange, and I waited until about 7:30, 7:45, and then I started throwing, and I had a big 6.0 Semper, I think it was an olive one. I had to drop the fish, and then as it got dark at about 8 o'clock, I put on a black Semper, and within half an hour, I hooked up, and it was just the most unbelievable take that you can imagine. And I don't know if you probably are familiar with the mouth area, but south of that, probably 200-300 meters south of that, there's a big rock that stands out. It looks like somebody standing there.
Yes.
And I could just imagine this thing. And I mean, there's just bricks everywhere there. And I was just imagining that this thing was going to wrap me around that thing 3 or 4 times and just say, cheers, pal, I'm out of here. Sure. But I managed to get this fish in. And I remember as it got to, in that sort of surf zone, we had headlamps on at that point in time. And I said, Togozani, one of our helpers, I said to him, Togozani, get in and get hold of that fish. Dive on it if you have to.
Sure.
Togozani dived on this fish, gets hold of this thing, and as he carried this thing onto the beach, like as that fly fell out of its mouth. And it's interesting, I've heard you guys talk quite a lot about hooks and things like this, and that was the SL12S, and it was the 6.0. And I've got a photograph of it on one of the albums where it was slightly open. And I still phoned, it was David Levine. I phoned David, and I said to him, David, you said you can hook whales on this thing. And I sent him this photograph, and he said, well, there was something wrong with the hook. Yeah. So I said, no. But that's the only hook that I've ever had an issue with, where it's actually opened a little bit, but was good enough to land the fish. But But that was just an amazing, that was a 108 centimeter fish, but it was incredible. But it's just that sensation when it's pitch dark, because it's wonderful fishing at night because you actually have tunnel vision and you concentrate a lot more.
Absolutely.
And you can just imagine what this thing was doing and where it was going, etc. And it's just you and this amazing force on the other end. And it's like a primordial force, and it's a thing that you've never experienced yourself, because it's just such an incredible sensation of this power on the other end of it, and you actually trying to control this thing, knowing that all the odds are stacked against you, you know, in terms of the surf condition, the wind, the rocks, and everything out there. And so, you know, once you hook a fish, that's you know, probably 40% of the whole thing. The next thing is landing it, and there you need a lot of luck, you know, and there's very little you can do once that happens. You know, it's just it's luck. And yeah, and we've lost numerous fish, and as I say, over the 18 years, I think only 18 fish have been landed in our rock and surf zone. So yeah, it's an amazing feat.
Ben, how many fish over 100 centimeters have you yourself landed?
5.
And how many would you say over 100 centimeter plus fish have you yourself hooked and been schooled by?
Oh, 25. Yeah, at least, you know, over the years. And, you know, having said that, I haven't fished cozy specifically for catching jeets in the last few years, you know, just because of business commitments, etc., and going overseas to the Maldives and what have you. But, you know, when I do the Rocktail Bay workshops, we do fish those times, but it's more on the workshop side of it. So you can't sort of dedicate your time to catching jeets, because there's, you know, we've got to catch bluefin, and we've got to do all other sort of things that, you know, being a workshop, it's multidisciplinary and faceted as well. But we have had occasion where we've had really good conditions, you know, where we have a big blockbuster southwesterly coming through, big waves, big winds, etc., like this, and it's game on, you know. And one of the most amazing achievements, and I think you guys will find this quite interesting, was one of our clients, Andrew Blades. We were at La Lanecta one night, and we sort of got up. We get up at 4, well, we leave there at 4 o'clock, and we got to the water. We must have been on the water at about 20 past 4. It was still pitch black. And he was fishing a 9-weight, and he had one of our little 4.0 brass bait fish patterns on it. It's a gray pattern. Second cast, he hooks up on this fish. He lands it in that sort of rock and surf zone. It was 97 centimeters, and that was on a 9-weight. And I just said to him, that was absolutely amazing, you know, because it was just so against the odds, you know. And I've got a photograph of that fish here, and it was really a remarkable achievement. So it can happen, you know. And that was on a 4.0 SL12S hook with a fly that was probably 2 centimeters long. Incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, Ben. You know what I think it is. You know, it's such a difficult pursuit, and I think you'll agree that you and I are not saying that to try and blow steam up either of our asses to proclaim how good we are, but it's almost near mythical. It's kind of like, you know, watching a Bigfoot documentary and, you know, actually debating, you know, do these creatures actually exist? Is it really there? Is it not folklore? Is it not just urban legends? And, you know, I remember the first couple times I went to Cozy Bay, obviously having read your articles and things like that, I kind of resigned myself in my own mind that something like that was just not possible. It was, well, sorry, not plausible. It wasn't impossible, but it was highly implausible. And I'd have to put in, you know, well, they say that the largemouth yellowfish is a 10,000 cast fish. I'd argue that the GT is probably 1 million cast fish.
Yeah.
And I went through there with a friend of mine, and I remember fishing, I think it was around about marker 10 or marker 11, which at that stage we called the aquarium. It was a beautiful day, blue turquoise water. I strapped my 12-weight away, and I took out my 9-weight, and I thought I'd have some fun species bashing. And I threw out a very flashy profile seducer, and I was casting at water at a sort of drop-off that had a shadow from another rock over it, and it just looked very fishy. And I remember casting and casting and casting. I was struggling to get distance, and eventually there was a little little gust of wind behind me. I managed to get my fly in there, and I went tight. And I was really excited with a nice green spot or something like that. While I was fighting this fish, I obviously called to my friend who was on the beach, who had a plugging stick that he came across situations that didn't permit him to use the fly rod. And I assumed that he was within casting distance. either way, I called to him to come and take a picture of what I thought was about a 3.5 or a 4-pound green spot. And as it got closer and it fought harder, it looked more like a 6.5, 7.5 pound green spot. Anyway, I was on an elevated position, and as this green spot came closer to me, in the corner of my eye, I looked down and I saw this sort of gray shape moving towards me. And obviously we'd seen an abundance of turtles. It was the turtle hatchling season. And I looked down, and the moment I saw those bars over its back in that position, and those very pronounced, very hostile, combative pectoral fins that were sort of erect, I knew exactly that I wasn't looking at a turtle, but I was looking at a GT. And before the thought, I think, the full word managed to manifest itself in my mind, I was screaming to my friend, GT, GT, GT. I turned around to look at where he was, obviously far, far, far away from, not within casting distance, but he was casting and running at the same time, probably about 90 meters out. And by the time I looked back, the fish that I'd been fighting for a good sort of 5 or 6 minutes, which was quite tired, was now thrashing on the surface and had this enraged GT that was doing everything it possibly can to engulf it. And I would just stood there in absolute disbelief, not knowing what to do. I was fishing a 9-weight with 20-pound fluorocarbon. And as my friend got to me, Tiger, he literally got to my shoulder. This GT inhaled this green spot whole, as if it was the last peanut on a plate, and then proceeded to sort of, I wouldn't say shoot off to the distance, just casually trot it off with my fly in its mouth. And I don't know what to do. I had a size 2.0 Seducer on an SL12S. So I thought to myself, do I let this GT swallow it? Do I strike? Do I not strike? There's bombers everywhere. Long story short, this fish pretty much ended up spooling me. And as my line parted eventually, Tiger looked at me and he said to me, "Welcome to Cozy Bay, my friend. Now you understand." And yeah, ever since then, it's just been an absolute obsession of mine.
There was another occasion, a little bit similar to that. One of our guests, John Neves, one year, we were just north of the mouth, and he hooked into a proper jeet there. And I mean, this thing just took him and cleaned him up. And afterwards, John was just like he was shivering and he could hardly get a word out. But eventually, when he did say, I said to him, Jake, I said, that fish has got a name. And he said, well, what is it? I said, it's called Comeback. He says, I think that thing's frightened me now. I'm actually scared of these things because they're so powerful. I mean, the power of those fish is very difficult to explain. But just going back to, how difficult it is, because I mean, as I say, in the history of South African fly fishing, only 18 of these fish have been landed over the 18 years. So, I mean, that gives you a really, really good indication of how difficult it is. And I know there's a lot of guys that have got this obsession to target these fish and try and land them. And it requires a lot of determination and a lot of time on the water. I mean, I often have people phoning and sort of saying, well, let's go to Cozy Bay, or can we go to Cozy Bay and catch jeets? I said, well, how good is your casting? What experience have you got, etc.? And it ends up 90% of the time, having spoken to this person, without being derogatory, you sort of say to them, it's best you come on a fly fishing workshop, first of all, because if I have to take you specifically to go and target jeets, we're going to be fishing at 8, 9 o'clock at night. I'm going to paddle you out to a reef. I'm going to anchor the ski there, and I'm going to put you on the reef until the waves start pushing you off, and you've got to get back into that thing and come back again. But for 4 days, you're going to be casting a 12 weight for 2-3 hours at a time, and you might not get a take whatsoever. So if you're good for that, it's game on. Let's go. And very few people are prepared to do that. So, and it really is. It's an obsession, and it's something that you've really got to say to yourself that this is what you want to do, because it alarms me a little bit about people who go off to the Seychelles and catch fish there on the flats and what have you, and think, well, this is GT fishing, and catch 120 centimeter fish, and think that's what it is, catch GT. Come to South Africa, catch one here. It's a completely different ball game. This is a real McQuay here, and it's really, really difficult. Sure. So I think very, very special fish. And if you look at as I say, if you just look at the stats of it all, the number of fish that have been lost, the number of fish that have actually been landed, it tells its own story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm not taking anything away from the flats fishermen at all. But I think you'll argue, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Say it's very different to sort of going to Brookwood Trout Estate in South Africa and catching a 6-pound trout compared to going to the Yellowstone Natural Park and obviously catching a 3-pound trout on a 7 or an 8x tippet. The currents, the conditions, it's a whole different ball game. And I mean, I've caught tarpon up to 100 pounds. I've caught very big fish. I know what it's like firsthand to have permit fever, and not taking anything away from the people that sort of that endeavor to pursue that pursuit. But yeah, the GT fishing is a whole different ballpark. Ben, when did you come up with the idea to fish a circle hook in lieu of a J hook, and why?
I tell you, it was Honor van der Nest that first suggested it, and I liked the concept. I had a look at the hook. And we got hold of the owner hook, which was a really nice circle, and then obviously, you know, all the literature around the circle hook, you know, how it works, etc. What I particularly liked about it was the way it keeled flies as well. You know, we were using sort of profile flies, and that keeled them particularly well, especially in sort of very turbulent water.
Could you just break that down into layman's terms for some of the viewers that might perhaps not follow what you mean by keel in turbulent water?
Yeah, so in other words, it's how, you know, so we were fishing quite sort of thin profile flies, you know, which were quite deep bodied. Yeah. And a lot of the areas where we target these or look for these GTs is where there's lots of cross currents and rips, etc. And these fish would, these flies tend to swim on their sides, they fall over, etc. So the idea of having a deeper keel on the fly, and especially a weighted one without adding any weight to it, we also tried that, by the way, of just adding actual weight to the normal J hook, and that didn't work particularly well. But because it's low slung, in fact, I've got some here. It's these ones. Can you see?
Yes, that looks perfect. Very familiar with those. Yeah.
And it tied flies particularly well. They were quite heavy, and as I say, it was more because of the way it keeled the flies. And then secondly, I found the hookups was absolutely amazing. And I've used them in the Maldives, I used them in the Seychelles, and I've never had an issue. I know a lot of people are quite skeptical about it. I've got no problems with them whatsoever. In fact, on this last trip now, I hooked with the same fly. I got 2 jeets, one of 111. I think the other one was 102 or something like that. But they really, really are. I really enjoy them. I think,
and obviously because of the way that the GT hunts, it's 9 times out of 10 you hook that fish, it's going to be in the scissor if it's with a circle or a J hook. And obviously a scissor is far greater designed to penetrate in that fish, in the scissor of that fish's mouth. When you are stripping, whether fast or slow, when the fish eats, how do you set the hook with a circle hook? Do you wait? Do you just carry on tightening up into the fish? What do you personally recommend?
Jack, for me, this is one of the biggest misnomers in this fly fishing genre is striking or setting the hook. I do a double-handed retrieve because you just don't miss a take. So in other words, you pulling and the fish pulls on the other end. There's no setting the hook, nothing. That's it. It's you strip, the fish strips on the other end. That's the set. It's done. You can't. There's no way that you can stand and strike there. I'm not sure what you would do that with anyway, because as you're stripping, the fish is pulling the other way. It's taken that fly. In fact, what a lot of GTs do is as they lunge at the fly or at a fleeing bait fish, they actually sometimes the tails even come over the top, but they lunge at this thing and then swipe either to the left or the right, and that's when you get these hookups. But the idea of actually striking or setting the hook, that's out of the equation, because as I say, you double handing retrieve, doing a retrieve, and the fish it takes a fly, it's game on straight away. There's no such thing as even the time to think about track. It happens so quickly.
So so the fish eats, you basically just carry on until the line's going in opposite direction.
You hold on. So the thing is, you hold on as that fish takes. You lock up, and that's it. And then, as I say, it'll run. I've actually got some really good video material now from the Maldives. We had a filmmaker with us, and I had my GoPro on. And there's one particular scene that I'm busy working out the video with, where from my point of view, you can see this is now in the surf zone. In fact, just to go back a step or two, I only sight fish in the Maldives and in the surf zone. I don't cast blind at all. So I only sight fish. So you might stand there for an hour or two, or whatever it is. Sometimes 3 hours, nothing happens, but sometimes you see 8, 10 fish in that period as well. The trick is to see them early, to get your fly and lead the fish, etc. But in this particular occasion, you can see me talking to a guest saying, "Can you see that fish?" He says, "No, can't see it." So then I walk forward, I make the cast, you see the fish come on, you see the take, and off it goes. At the same time, this filmmaker was filming me, so you see me sort of walking out, making the cast, doing the strip, and seeing, and and then having the fish on. So it's a really fantastic perspective. It's like you the angler, seeing the fish and seeing the action, and then somebody else seeing it, the third party. So I'll get that out on a YouTube video at some point in time, hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so. But that's really interesting.
Great. We'd appreciate it. We'll embed that link and we'll send it through to all of our followers. Yeah, that's great. And it's interesting to say that you use circle hooks in the Seychelles and the Maldives, not just not just fishing blind.
I use it depends, for the SL7s, the SL12S, I use on the 6Os, depending, like if you want to really cast far and if you have to cast in adverse conditions, I tend to use that because you can get much more distance. But normally I use either the SL12S, that's 6O, or the 8O for on the centers. I mean on the circles. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. I got you, Ben. And in terms of tides, I mean, obviously you can go on and on about this. I want to try, like I said, I want to do my very best to keep this as an elevator pitch as possible. But you and I could probably talk about the merits of this for hours and hours and hours. In terms of your ideal tide, if you had one tide to choose, you had one weather system, one wind, one moon phase to target GTs on the South African coastline, describe your perfect scenario, your dream scenario to go and target these fish.
Cozy Bay is a little bit of an exception in the sense that there's different structure, because of the estuarine lake system there. So I'm going to leave that one out of the equation. But just under normal sort of conditions, I'd want to be fishing at either 4:30 in the morning on a dropping spring tide, with a blockbuster southwesterly that's come through. Or I'd want to be fishing with the same conditions, really, really big surf, gale force wind blowing, with big rips developing at about 5:30 to 7 o'clock at night. Yeah.
So basically, your average fisherman's worst nightmare.
Sure. But when that's, and that's, I've actually said to a couple of guys who are keen on doing this, and I just said, you need to be on sort of like a 24-hour call. So if we look at the weather pattern and we see there's around about a spring tide, and if we see that there's a blockbuster coming through, you pack up your bags and get into your car and you drive to Cozy Bay and you go and camp at the mouth. Those are the sort of ideal conditions that you really want. When that big wind comes through and you've got really big surf. Those two jeets that I got couple of years ago, one after the other, it was on the similar conditions. There were massive winds and huge surf. In fact, the beachfront was actually flooded, and they thought it was some sort of a tsunami, etc. And when we got to Rocktail Bay, and it just coincided with one of our workshops, I've never seen it like that. There were casuarina trees that on the sort of primary dune that were being that were falling over, and in fact we couldn't even access Lala Neck because of the precipitous drop onto the beach, etc. And then early in the morning, you'd have that big tide coming through, and it was really dangerous just for guests to walk along there. And at Rocktail itself, I mean, there were just massive swells coming through into the bay, up against the big bank that had been eroded, and then you get that back surge going through, and that was when the action was really on, and these fish were chasing mullet. 3 or 4 kilogram mullet way out at sea, where they'd actually got them into a rip, up against on a sandbank, and then they would home in on like one fish, and you see this fish jumping in and being clubbed, sometimes 10 feet in front of you, and it was absolutely amazing. An interesting thing too, just about, we were at Rocktail Bay on one occasion and on early mornings, low tide, and it was just starting to push. And as we got there, you know, to the point at the end, we saw there must have been 8 GTs, all a meter roundabout there, and they chased in a whole lot of mullet. And I thought, well, this just can't get it better than this. Put a fly in front of them, they weren't interested, not interested at all. And what they were doing, and we saw this for the rest of the day, they were hunting in a pack. And what they would do is they would go around, herd, get the mullet all into a shoal, into a tight shoal, and then chase them. Yeah, so it was clear what these fish were doing. It was like an organized strategy. They would go out as a team, almost herd these fish up into a small bait ball, and then charge, and then feed them. And we saw, we just gave up on them, because I mean, it was like watching lion kill the whole day. I mean, you'd see these massive chases coming in, mullet 3-4 kilograms jumping out the water, getting smashed, etc. And throw what we'd like at them, it wasn't. There was no interest whatsoever. So it was clearly a case of these fish working in tandem, and as you know, as a strategy, like a pack of lions would. You know, like when tracking down buffalo or whatever the case would be. It was amazing. It was absolutely incredible to see. So the fish that we would probably be hooking up would be a fish that's cruising, looking for bait fish in a particular area, but not sort of hunting in a strategy with 10 other fish, obviously trying to, you know, herd bait fish into a tight ball, and then starting the chase. So it's a case of, waiting for those fish, and then presenting a fly that looks and behaves like an escaping bait fish. That would obviously, I think that's really the trigger.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I had a very similar situation in December over 2 or 3 trips where I saw an abundance of fish in the areas we were fishing. I couldn't believe it. I might as well very well have been in the Seychelles with the abundance of fish that I saw coming in. Some were smashing bait fish, some were cruising. And I had multiple refusals on the hyper-realistic patterns. But when I started throwing the black and purple flies specifically with a rattle in it, the change in the fish's behavior from fish, if not eating the fly, to chasing it right up to my rod tip was very, very noticeable. And I saw, you know, I say chase up to my rod tip. Very often I was up to my chest in the swell, obviously getting hammered by the wave. So trying to get a consistent strip, sometimes I'd miss a strip or something like that. And obviously the fish would be a little bit less committal than if I was on a skiff or in the flats. I think if I'd managed to get a proper strip in there, I would have been able to hook a lot more fish. Yeah. But that's how I managed to sort of develop that dingon fly that I put together. And, you know, I've been very skeptical over the use of rattles and things like that. But fishing in December, November, and then again early in the beginning of this year, I couldn't believe the difference. Travis
Hello.
who was also recently went through that. Can you hear me, Ben?
Yeah, I lost you for a bit, but we're back on. Yeah.
Yeah. Travis Owens went through there, and he had exactly the same thing. He was throwing big Andino deceivers, and his brother actually hooked into a massive GT that hurt his feelings. But he was throwing big black Andino deceivers with rattles. So very interesting to note. I was my fishing partner fishing hyper-realistic patterns, throwing at fish that we could visibly see all day, every day. And the fish that he threw at with hyper-realistic patterns didn't so much as they acknowledged the fly. I think the best analogy would be it looked as if one of the fish had farted in the school and the other ones were kind of looking at him to say, what's going on here? And swimming off. Whereas when we were throwing the black and purple, these fish were actively chasing the fly down. I've also been to Lala Neck, and I had GTs that refused our flies all day, every day. And went back the same day, same tide, and saw what we could have sworn was the same fish. Do you think a lot of these GTs are territorial?
It's a difficult question. I would imagine yes. I think in certain occasions, at certain times of the year, they are. We're actually busy with a really interesting experiment at Mtentu, where we've now for the first time done some telemetry tagging of kingfish there. So we've got 2-3 listening stations there. And then there's a whole platform that go up the coast between the continental shelf, up into Mozambique and into Tanzania, of listening stations. And it's been fascinating getting the results back. It's still relatively new, but we tagged 9 fish. So just for those who don't know, telemetry tag is like a little radio thing. So in other words, the listening station is put on the sea bottom on a concrete plinth, and they've got GPS readings for those things, and the battery lasts for a year. And so that's almost like, to give you another analogy, it's almost like that's the cell phone tower, and the kingfish is the guy with the cell phone. So
Sure.
we catch them. You make an incision into a stomach cavity, insert the tag. They last up to 10 years, and the smaller tags 3 years, the bigger ones 10 years. And as they swim past any of these listening stations, within 400 meters, it'll pick up their passage there. And up until that point, all the sort of tagged fish that we've got,
Sure.
normal sort of dart tags, was that the furthest a fish had ever swum that had been recaught was 270 odd kilometers. And what we're now seeing is that these fish, we've now got results of fish that have been up to Mozambique and have come back down to Mtentu, which is certainly a hell of a lot further than that. And that's really interesting stuff. So we'll now keep, every year, each time they lift up one of these stations, we'll start getting results of these telemetry tagged fish, which I'm fascinated in getting. And we've done this with Dr. Paul Cowley and Dr. Bruce Mann here from Ori. Paul Cowley is with the South African Institute of Aquatic Biodiversity, that's in Grahamstown.
Yeah.
But we probably will tag some more fish. But I do think that certain fish are resident in a particular area for certainly a certain time of the year. Whether that's the case the rest of the time, I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Also, when I went through in December, we saw a pack of 3 GTs almost every day that were very, very similar in their coloring. They had almost bluefin-like coloring, but obviously I doubt you're going to find a bluefin that's over 110 or 115 centimeters coming in and out. And we had numerous fish shots of these fish. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to convert. Ben, in closing, I'd like you to present that trophy just to the camera so you can show people. On the actual UFUDU trophy, I think it's fair to say that the majority of the fish that have come out of one of 2 places on the KwaZulu-Natal coastline. Do you think, obviously with the exception of Marker 10 and the exception of Cape Vidal, where Paul Vanguard's got his fish, do you feel that there are other opportunities along our coastline where people have got a very good shot at fishing, at catching a 1 meter GT, or do you think that it's extremely limited?
I think it is possible. Surely, I mean, it's come into places. So it's really the structure of the place and whether you can access these places at those, where it's safe to access these places at those low light conditions, because it's really that from 4 o'clock in the morning till also the first sort of sign of light, say 6 o'clock, say from 4 to 6, that sort of period. And then again, if you're fishing around your neap tide periods, or even if it is a spring on a drop, you're wanting to fish until about 8 o'clock at night. So safety is always a bit of an issue. The structure obviously is what's really important, is where you get big rips and obviously bait fish being prevalent in that sort of area.
Sure.
And so I must say I haven't tried Jex's Point, which is at the mouth of the Ilova River, is probably, or the Mvoti River is probably one of the places. But again, I'm not too sure about one's security and safety there. But certainly Rocktail Bay, Cape Vidal, if you go to Mission Rocks, Mission Rocks, very, very, but you've got to know your story there, because that can be dangerous because, just of wave action, etc. there. And I know Paul had a bit of an issue there as well with security on one occasion quite a few years ago, where he was actually
I believe he shot someone.
Yeah, well, he shot at somebody, yeah. And that was a bit nasty. But Mission Rocks, that's south of Cape Vidal, really, really good. Lot of GTs in that area. But as I say, you've got to know your story, and certainly you don't go alone there. Go with at least with a mate, and make sure that somebody else knows where you are.
Sure.
Those would be. If you look at the coastline from you know, all of those areas, if you go from I suppose Sudwana all the way up to Cozy Bay, because you know, you've got much warmer sort of water, etc. Clarity is great. It's really to find the correct structure where you're getting big rips. And then the most important thing is getting those wind conditions, you know, especially when you get that big surf happening, because you, and most of those points that we talk about on that north coast are on a northeast axis. And, you know, as you get that northwesterly coming or that southwesterly coming through, you get those big rips developing on the inside of those points. Yeah. Baitfish, you know, take refuge there, etc. And these G's push them up into that sort of, you know, turbulent water, and that's when your chances are probably the best. Another aspect that I always think is really important, I notice you guys talk a lot about flies and things, you know, as this sort of, as a very important aspect, which it is, you know, and I keep saying to people, you must have confidence in the fly that you fish. But it's only one part in the whole recipe of catching fish. And I keep saying to people, the fly doesn't catch fish, you catch the fish. Sure. You know, there's lots of things that entail that are incorporated into that, being at the right place at the right time. I mean, you can write a book about that. Yeah. And stripping is also really, really important. And I see this, it's really amazing when you sight fishing to fish, like say, for example, in the Maldives or in the Seychelles, etc., where you can actually see a fish, and when you're getting refusals, etc. And I've seen it, I've had it on numerous occasions. It's just the difference. You can fish the same fly, you can cast just as well, but it's the difference in the strip. And it's absolutely incredible. The speed with which you think, the motion that you put into the fly, really, really important. And I say to people, long before you change your fly, change your retrieve. It's absolutely incredible. In fact, I've got some really good video material of, it was long ago, we were fishing off Madagascar, and this client of ours, Derek Beeling, was, in fact, Paul Weingarts was with me. He was sitting right next to me. I just caught 104 centimeter Jeet, and we had this sort of, there was like this little virus that was going around, and it was like 24-hour sickness, and everybody on this yacht got it, you know. So you would have it for one day, and you would vomit and shit and do all sorts of things for 24 hours, and then you were fine, and then the next person would get it. And I just come over one of these things, and we were sitting on a particular rock we called Submarine Rock, and there was a nice rip putting past it, and I landed this fish. And then Derek Beeling went on, and he started fishing there, and Paul and I were chatting, and I just said to Derek, just change your retrieve, you know. And he said, how? And I said, and I explained to him, and as Stu's got the next cast that he put out, he hooks his Jeet, and that's the story in itself. But that was just over a meter fish as well. So I think the retrieve is really, really important, and especially a double-handed retrieve. And what you want to try and impart is a sort of a staggered motion, you know. So it's almost like a bit of a jerk sort of action into the thing, as opposed to like a hamster on the wheel where the things, you know, that the fly is just swimming gradually. So you want to put some erratic movement into the fly, vary your retrieve. But for me, really, really important. And another aspect that I think is very important that I wrote an article about, which is quite difficult, and it's this thing that very few people talk about, and it's called the timing of your cast. Really, really important in the surf zone. And it's actually just tuning into what's happening in the surf zone. So when you're getting a big set coming in, you end up with this water pushing up like this, and then you have that big suck that goes out. That's when you want to get that fly in. So yes, before that suck starts, you want to throw across there, swing that fly into where it's sucking, so you know where the hole is, where the big rips are, and that's probably where the fish are going to be coming from, or using that area to chase fish up from. So it's a case of throwing out, watching the surge come in, throwing the fly out there and waiting for this thing to suck, and the fly pulling around into the area where you think the fish are, and that's where you want it to be retrieving from. Sure. Really, really important.
And obviously taking the slack out of your line, which is important, keeping you direct contact with the fly.
Sure. So it's a case of saying, where do I think the fish is sitting? Cast out there, and when that thing sucks, when the rip is pulling the most at the point in that thing where you've got your fly at the right depth as well. Very, very important. And it's a thing that, as I say, very few people are aware of. You know, people just cast and cast. They cast into foamies that are coming in, and you know, their fly is not going anywhere. It's not getting up into that sort of what we call the zone where you think the fish is, you know, and that, yes, and you want maximum swim time in that zone. It's critical,
Sure.
absolutely critical. And you maximize, so you minimize the amount of false or let's say useless casts that you make, maximize your time in that zone, or that, let's call it the kill zone, that you're swimming the fly in at that particular point in time. Absolutely critical.
Sure, Ben. So in summation, you prefer big rips, you prefer big wind. You mentioned the southwesterly as being the proverbial game changer, if not a southeasterly. You said you started talking a little bit about leader dynamics. You said you personally fish a polymer, fluorocarbon, and mono. What breaking strain? How do you fish? Is that just a straight?
I fish that 100 pound. Yeah, it's 100 pound, and it makes a nice knot, and I go straight. So in other words, so I have a braided loop on the end of the fly line, a 50-pound braided loop that we. It's quite simple to do, but do it right though, obviously. And then just a double surgeon from there that goes into, that you loop onto, and then from there your Rapala knot going onto the fly, or there's various knots that you can use, and that's it. It's simple as that. In South Africa, you've got to be a little bit careful, especially on a flooding tide, where we're pushing from low on thing. If you're hooking up on rocks, then I would fast tip it into it, and then I would use 2 biminis on either side to create your loops. And then use your big loop to do a double uni knot onto your 100-pound bite tippet.
Sure. So
I would go, say, probably about 18 kgs for my class tippet, with the 2 biminis on either side of that. The big loop, that loops with the double uni onto the bite tippet. But generally, if you're feeling relatively confident with where you are and familiar with the substrate, etc., I just go straight 100 pound. Okay. On the basis that if you do hook up, you're going to swim, because otherwise you're going to break a fly line. That's for sure.
That's why I bought so many of your fly lines, Ben. I've had to break many of them. I mean, your fly line's got a 50-pound core, but if you're fishing 100-pound mono, there's going to be one outcome. Yeah. And So Ben, look, I think, like I said, you and I can speak for hours. I'm most definitely going to be touching base with you and checking in on a personal basis to chat to you and discuss tackles and techniques. I'd love to join you on some of your workshops. When do you host your workshops? Are you going to be hosting anytime soon? How can people get hold of you?
Well, the workshops were always at Rocktail Bay, which unfortunately just very recently the existing owners, which was Wilderness Safaris, they've sold it to somebody else, and the new owners have now run into difficulty or problems with the park sport guys who own under whose jurisdiction it falls. So they've got another camp at Gugulasizwe, which is sort of inland from there, but it's just also on the boundary of the Isimangaliso Reserve, and we can access it from there. And I had our first workshop scheduled for last week or 10 days ago, which is obviously now being cancelled as a result of this. So that's the only option, and we'll have to wait and see when we can access these areas again. Sure. But so I don't have anything planned, and unfortunately, most of the ideal tides and season coincide with my Maldivian season as well. So I can't be in 2 places at the same time. But we'll probably look at something in October, November, early December. Okay. I try and do it out of the holiday period. But sure. Again, it's very tide orientated and obviously seasonal as well. So from about October through to November, and then probably again, you see in January, February, March, I'm in the Maldives. So I can't do it then. I might do something in April, for example, next year again. But they've been really, really popular, and they book up pretty quickly. But people seem to have found a lot of value in those and learned a lot. And we often get a lot of repeats, which is great. Just going back to your trophy, by the way, it's yes. I don't know, can you see it? Can you guys see it? Can you see it there?
Yeah, if you can just move the camera down slightly. Yeah, that's the trophy. And if you could just zoom in. So if you could just explain to someone that may have just been jumping on here, Ben, whoever catches a GT with a fork length over 100 centimeters, they are put onto that trophy. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it has to be in the South African rock and surf zone. So it's not an estuary. So in other words, all the fish that we would catch, say, or that we caught at Mtentu, for example, they don't count at all. Or if you catch one in the Cozy Lake system, that doesn't count. It's got to be in the rock and surf zone.
Yes.
So it's 100 centimeters and more in in South Africa from the rock and surf zone, and that's very specifically that. So, and that's what it is. And this was a trophy that was made by Chris Bladen, the sculptor, and it's in bronze. It's beautiful, and it really is. He made this, and the way we paid for it was we gave him a tripodum tentu in lieu of paying for it. But it's been a fantastic thing, and people come in, and as I say, you the latest addition to this. If we can you see that? Let's see.
Put the camera down slightly. Yeah, I can see the name.
Can you see that? Yeah, so your name's the very last one, and that's the 18th one that was there. The first one. Let me get my glasses on. The first one was caught in 2001, and then the second one 2002, 2002. Yeah, but as I say, it's more or less like one a year. You know, I think here in 2017, I got the two in 2 consecutive days, which was quite amazing, and that was just also because of the very conducive surf conditions that prevailed at the time. But
Ben,
it is
a big concern that I have is that I just want to make sure you got enough space on there for the rest of the GTs that myself and my friends are going to be catching over the next 5 years.
We've got plaques on either side, on each side. So that's the one plaque is now, that one's full. So we've got 2 more plaques to go, and we can add more on. We can put them on the top here. We can do whatever it is. So no, don't worry. I think I'll be long dead and gone when that thing is full. That's for sure, at the current rate that the guys are catching. But I'm really not a person that's into competitive stuff, and this is bigger and whatever. But it's about what we were talking about earlier on. It's the challenge of catching these fish in our rock and surf conditions, and I reckon that's some of the toughest things that is available in fly fishing world over. This is really, really tough. I mean, to give you an example, I just had a whole lot of Canadians in the Maldives. Now, again, where we sight fish for jeets in the surf zone. And as I say, I only cast sighted fish. And you're getting swatted around. You've got to stand for hours, look for these fish, see them early, all that sort of thing, get your cast in. Sometimes you see them late and you've got to get a cast in really quickly. And these guys are saying that this is really, really tough. I mean, that's there where you've got wonderful conditions, etc.
Sure.
And I mean, they don't know what this is like. This is in a completely different league. And I always say to somebody, I always say this to many people, if you can come into our South African rock and surf zone and catch fish regularly here, you can go anywhere in the world and you'll catch fish. No matter where it is, you'll do well. Because
I think that's why a lot of our you know, the Jaco Lucases and the Christian Pretoriuses, etc., have done so well overseas, because they've cut their teeth on our coastline and on our shores. Yeah,
sure. No, it's brilliant. It's absolutely amazing. So for those guys listening and wanting to do this, it's time in the water, and it's a real passion with which you have to attack this thing. But the rewards are unbelievable. I mean, it's like your golfing analogy of a hole in one. It's probably even more than that, you know. But it really is. It's special, and I think it's a pursuit, and especially, you know, the work that you guys are doing and the enthusiasm with which you're promoting this thing is fantastic. And long may that continue.
I really appreciate that, Ben, and thanks very much for the opportunity to chat to you. In closing, I just want to I think the best way to summarize this is a friend of mine described our pursuits. You know, he drew parallels to, again, the Bigfoot analogy, and he said the difference between catching a 1 meter GT on fly in the South African coastline and Bigfoot is that people have actually seen Bigfoot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it is. It's amazing. It's great chatting, Jack. Yeah, and keep up the good work. Yeah, fantastic.
I appreciate it, Ben. All the very best. For those that want to get in touch or get hold of Ben, you can have a look at his handle on here. It's at UFUDU Flyfishing. Ben, do you have a website?
We have a website, yeah, at www.ufuduflyfishing.co.za. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I see some people have asked us about your life vest and stuff like that. We'll be sending through all those details. Ben, have a wonderful evening and all the very best.
Fantastic. Take care.
Hopefully I'll see you on the water.
Yeah, stay tight and stay safe. Cheers.
Cheers, bud. Bye.
Bye now.